Cool, man. Well, the first thing I wanted to get into is the YouTube algorithms. I don't know how I stumbled on your stuff, but what stood out to me was it's very minimalist, it's raw, and you give no bullshit advice. I appreciate that, man. You don't try to doll it up too much. It just is what it is. You just record yourself. The little bit of memes and stuff you add, it's really good entertainment value. And I bought your ebook as well, which is really awesome. And the first thing I wanted to get into is what got you into lifting, and how did that lead to you creating a YouTube channel?
Yeah, so I had actually originally been a runner. So I had, ran from like about 15 years old up until around 25. And, I really enjoyed it, but it's a tough sport. It's at least as tough as lifting, just in terms of like the pounding on the body and just the toll it takes. Like years and years of running 70, 80, 90 miles a week. And then, so I was kind of just sort of tired with that and done with it. And, I figured lifting would be an interesting new challenge. And so I started lifting at about 25 years old, which, is a little bit on the late side.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I tell people, oh, I started lifting at 25, they don't believe me. They're like, no. Like, you had to have started when you were like 6 years old in a Chinese weightlifting dungeon or something, right? But no, I started at 25 and, progressed pretty well. And then, after about 5 or 6 years, I was very interested in it. I'd read a lot about it, and a bunch of people started asking me for advice. They're just like, hey, well, you're getting really good results. What are you doing? What do you own? That kind of thing. Yeah. But mostly it was just like actual, just, what exercises are good? Like, how should I set up a training program? What are the most effective techniques for gaining strength, getting muscle, etc. And, so I was happy to answer people's questions, almost like flattered in a way when someone asks you about something, you're walking down this road and people are, oh, what are you doing? How are you getting results? And eventually I got kind of lazy about answering all their questions. And that's how the ebook Sweat started, where I just wrote everything in a little book, just in a Word document, and would just send that to people for free, mostly out of laziness on my part.
Dude, right? There's nothing lazy about that. That book is in depth. How many hours did you put into that thing?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, hundreds and hundreds, at least, probably thousands actually, looking back at it. So yeah, it was a lot of work, but originally it was just out of laziness, because like you can tell this to hundreds and hundreds of people over and over again who are pretty much all asking the same questions, right? Yeah. Very similar questions. And so I just put it in a book and then would honestly just send it to people for free. And people were like, how is this free? What the fuck? This is ridiculous. And so, eventually I started charging money for it. Like I say, oh, you're interested? Like, oh, I have this PDF that I made. And so I would just sell it to people, mostly in China, just like friends and friends of friends, that kind of thing. And then eventually I put it on Amazon, and then I got into writing on Quora as well. So that was like late 2019 or so. And then snowballed into YouTube in like early 2020 or so. And then it sort of gradually progressed from there.
Crazy, man. And you're putting out videos consistently. That probably takes, people have this warped perception of what a YouTube entrepreneur would be. And I can only imagine how much time it takes as someone who, even editing podcast audio and the amount of time to get the videos, and even just like adding the meme content in there and the text and like everything. That's got to be, more than a 40-hour a week job.
Yeah, I'm either sleeping, working out, or working. And then, occasionally time with wife, friends, family, but not a lot of that. It's working several full-time jobs, basically, and it's, people always underestimate how much time goes into a video. Like when I see a highly produced piece of content, now I can sort of estimate how much time that takes. Like, so when I see a Jeff Nippard video where there's like lots of transitions and text and like scripting and planning, that is hundreds of hours easily. Or a Josh Brett video where there's like transitions and edits and graphics and just, it's like a full production, that kind of thing. Again, hundreds of hours easily. And then, I can sort of estimate how much time it takes. Not exactly, obviously, but you can sort of see how many layers are there. So when I see, a FitLab video, there's just so much going on, and that all takes time. And it all takes more time than you think, right? So basically, I will plan a video in the morning, along with coaching and custom plans and check-ins, that kind of thing. And then I will either shoot a video for that day or upcoming stuff at the gym or before the gym, just like sitting in front of the camera. And then I will edit from when I get home around like 5 p.m. until like midnight. So it'll be like 5, 6, 7 hours straight of just editing for like a 10 or 15 or 20 minute video, because it's like 10, 20, 30 minutes to edit 1 minute of footage easily.
Are you getting in a good amount of sleep as well?
Yeah, no, you have to, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. You have to, because every hour of sleep you sacrifice is just making the working hours less productive, right? And I see a lot of people burn out. Sleep is essential for keeping everything moving. You see consistency really is key with the YouTube algorithm, and then honestly with anything in life. So I used to try to put out 1 video per day, which is like, it's the video quality goes down, but it's not worth it, because eventually you get burned out. And all the people putting out 1 to 2 videos a day of quality content, it's not just them.
No,
right?
no
Like they have, there's no way. Like they have people who find them the content, then they record the content, then they have editors who edit everything. Like most big channels have 2 or 3 editors working full time.
Absolutely.
Just because, when you're putting out that much content, editing is the limiting factor. If there was no editing involved, I could put out 5 videos a day, just record it, shoot it out, easy, no problem. But I think going for quality over quantity is probably the better long-term strategy. And that kind of twice a day volume posting can certainly help with growth. But I think invariably the content gets a little bit watered down and people start to drop off. So you get like a lower percentage of people watching every single video. The total views might be higher, but in terms of like reaching new people and in terms of like solidifying the channel, I don't think it's quite as good as people think.
Yeah, you can't sacrifice the value out of the content for quantity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you can scale up, which is good. If you can find a way to have the same quality and just more of it, fantastic. But that's really tough to do. And especially if you're a one-man crew, the quality will go. It'll go somewhere. It'll go in the editing or in the scripting or in the research or somewhere. So I try to go for like 2 to 3 videos per week and then just be consistent over time. Because if I try to go 1 video a day or 2 videos a day, I'd be burnt out pretty quick.
Do you try to stay ahead of your content? Are you creating content for a week or 2 down the line, or?
So I used to just like wake up in the morning and be like, this is the video I'm fucking making. And then like that would be the video of the day. And so it's like, oh, here's lateral raises. I'm going to go to the gym and do some fucking lateral raises. It's shoulder day today. I had no idea before I woke up. But now I try to have more long-term projects just because I think that much planning does show in the content and in that quality. And I guess people can kind of like sense if something is just sort of thrown together. But if you have, I tried this for a month, I trained this for 100 days straight and these are the results. It's a lot more entertaining and then also informative rather than just like, I did this today, that kind of thing.
Another thing to consider is another thing I'm curious about is, do you find that filming yourself in the gym can get in the way of your own workouts? You're trying to film content to I think even Jeff Nippard talked about that, where he's filming his workouts and sometimes that takes away from his workout. Because I've tried to film my own workouts, whether that be for form or for social media and stuff like that. But I feel like it's like, damn it, I just don't want to film myself. I just want to zone in and do my work. Those are usually the best workouts I have. But as someone who's creating content and trying to bring value to people, do you feel like that can get in the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because, those fake weights aren't cheap. You gotta,
Yeah.
no. I mean, even if it's like, because when I film something, I don't change the sets, I don't change the technique, I don't change the reps. Like, that's just me working out. So in that regard, it doesn't take anything away. But yeah, you might have to get multiple angles. You might have to realize that your technique is going to be different for different sets. Mm-hmm. And plus technique is individual anyway. So people see me and I'm deadlifting and like my upper back is rounded and I'm braced, but that's not how everyone should deadlift by any means. And I try to like put that out there. Hey, like, this is just what I do. That's not necessarily what everyone should do, but that's tough because not everyone can understand that level of nuance, especially if they're a beginner and they're not that swift. They just see someone doing something and they're like, that's what people do. Like, that's what I should do. If I want to look like this guy, I need to do round back deadlifts. So, it does get in the way of the workout, and it does certainly add to the time. Especially like my gym is half outside, and so the wind will just come along and knock over the camera, and that's happened hundreds of times.
Yeah, I saw that. So is the weather in your area pretty consistent?
It is.
Can you work out in the wintertime? No problem.
Yeah. It doesn't really get that cold here. It goes down to it never snows or anything. But between you and me, the people here are such pussies when it comes to the cold weather. It goes like 55 degrees Fahrenheit and people are fucking bundled up, winter jackets and everything. I'm walking around in shorts and people are like giving me weird looks and stuff.
Yeah, that's got to be weird. Where are you originally from, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm from Connecticut originally, by way of New York. So for here, it's just like it never gets anywhere near cold at all.
Oh yeah.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah. I'm a Canadian, so I live in Alberta and it gets quite cold. It's very cold right now. Cool, man. Well, one of the things I wanted to jump into like the form thing, but I got a bit of an outline for today's conversation. The first thing I want to talk about here is I've seen a few videos of you. I don't know if I'm saying if you call out other coaches, but you talk about other people in the industry. And in my opinion, you do so respectfully from what I've seen.
Usually,
yeah, usually from what I've seen. But recently someone came back with some personal attacks and called you clueless, etc. I'm not going to drop names. If you want to drop names, you can. But to me, like YouTube fitness, I've noticed it. It's a very harsh and toxic environment now. It seems to be a lot of brands are like building off of drama. And there's definitely a time to call out the bullshit. But do you ever think about do you ever like question how you navigate it? Like, what are you worried about putting a target on your head when you call out other coaches and stuff like that?
Well, I try to be respectful, and occasionally I fail, but that's always like my baseline. I try to keep it as informational as possible. Mm-hmm. And the guy who called me clueless, it's not worth saying his name. Some people might know who it is, but like, not worth giving him clout.
Don't want to start some shit.
I mean, the thing is, in my original review, I praised his exercises. I said they were good. I said he knew his stuff.
Oh, don't worry about that. That might happen every once in a while. Don't worry about that.
Okay. So I praised him, his exercises. I recommend his book. I linked his book in a pinned comment. Yeah. The main issues I had were him vilifying and fear-mongering with the basic movements. Like, oh, don't do a preacher curl, you'll snap your biceps. Don't do a bench press, you'll snap your pecs. Don't do a deadlift, you'll snap your back. These kind of things where they're really not based in actual research. And these things might happen, but you might get hit by a bus every time you walk outside. Right? It's not really worth saying, oh, how dangerous buses are and we need to get rid of buses because a few people have gotten hit by buses, right? And so, I was very respectful. I just had issues with him taking down the main movements to promote his own movements.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can promote your own movements, and I actually said they were good, but just don't do it in that way. It's extremely intellectually dishonest. And, he came back with like calling me clueless a bunch of times and like saying I didn't know my stuff. And like his fans were very, very cultish, I guess would be the best word. And you do see these small bubbles grow. I mean, he's a pretty small account in the general scheme of things, but you do see these small bubbles grow, and some of them are huge. I mean, you look at Athlete X, that's a cult. Just read the comments.
Yeah.
I mean, it is unreal at how many people are just blinded because he's the only source of fitness information they've ever had, and they only know, oh, my shoulder hurt, and then I did face pulls, and this guy helped my shoulder. Like, now I am part of the cult, without actually realizing, a lot of his information is like way out there. He recently had a video on how sleeping is destroying your progress in the gym. Like if you sleep in the fetal position, or you sleep like on your back, or heaven forbid on your stomach, like it's the end of the fucking world. I thought it was satire. I honestly thought, I was like, is this satire? Oh my God, it's not satire. He's actually clarifying certain sleeping. Oh my God, your shoulder is internally rotated when you're sleeping, and your lumbar is not perfectly straight.
I remember that.
People make this shit up.
It's funny.
It's amazing.
It's funny because as a person, when you first get into lifting, it's the biggest account you find. When you go to YouTube to look for a YouTube advice, like me and my brother, well, 5 to 6 years ago, you get on YouTube and you find Athlete X, and then you find so and so and so and so. And there's some people that have tons of followers that have a lot of good information, but then you start, as you slowly kind of wade your way through the bullshit, you're like, oh, Renaissance periodization, or some of these smaller accounts that have, the real gems, and tons of there's a lot of accounts that are not super popular, but they have a ton of great information. But it seems like a lot of the most popular, most flashy accounts have a lot of bullshit.
There's extremely minimal, if not zero, correlation between channel size and the information quality. In fact, it might even be negative. The bigger the channel, the more the bullshit. I looked at all the fitness channels with over 1 million subscribers, and how many of them would I consider to be a good source of fitness information? One, like Jeff Nippard. Apart from that, I mean, not really. Like the majority are just like either fluff or infographic pseudoscience bullshit. We're saying how you're going to get a big chest with push-ups, like
So it's funny because I think about it, and we can call those accounts bullshit, but there's also a part of me that says, well, at least they're promoting exercise. At least they're, people are watching Athlete X, and they're going to the gym. And I'm not saying his advice is legit. There are pieces in it that are good. Like you even said in a video, when he talks about a certain thing, if he says something that's good, you're going to give him credit where it's due.
Yeah. But,
these accounts are still helping people, but then they are hurting people in a certain regard. So there's a part of me that's like,
So like I try to zoom out more than I used to. And I try to look at like, are they serving the greater good? Are they actually helping people? Are they, just trying to make a buck? Are they self-interested? People like V-Shred, not only is their information bad, but they're clearly pieces of shit. Like they're clearly just trying to prey on people who don't know very much about fitness. And so when it comes to them, the gloves are off, and I'm going to town.
There's a difference between
someone.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
So like when it comes to someone who their intentions are good and they just say something that's not quite accurate, I might just let it go, right? Like if they're an overall good channel and they just do something that's like not quite right, I'll probably just let it, like, it's not worth attacking someone who's doing something in good faith just for making a mistake or having a bit of information that was probably not generally applicable, was just personal experience, that kind of thing. But Athlete X got there early. He has a great physique, runs a shit ton of ads, puts like most of the money he makes from selling the garbage programs back into YouTube. And so, he has a huge head start, and it shows. He's very charismatic, again, great physique. And so it's not really too much of a surprise that his channel is huge. Like, he did everything the right way. The clickbait thumbnails, the fear mongering, etc. And so he's done everything right when it comes to growing his channel. It's just that a lot of what he does isn't quite morally right, I guess, in my opinion, at least.
Cool. Well, going into that, what do you recommend? For me, it was just trial and error. The more you get into this, the more you learn, you figure out who's full of shit and who isn't. But to some, and I'm still learning. It's a constant process. And for someone who is just getting into this, someone who's still a beginner, what would you say are the red flags to look out for regarding fitness influencers and so-called coaches? Like, how does someone properly calibrate their bullshit detector?
Yeah, no, it's not easy at all. And I don't want to say like, oh, there's a 3-step process to assess any source, because it is tricky. And there is a lot of gray area, and it's not all good or all bad. Like, V-Shred has had a few videos that are pretty good. I finished watching the video and I'm like, not bad. All right. You passed this one. Like, that was a decent deadlift tutorial. You didn't mess this one up, that kind of thing. So even bad channels will have good advice, and sometimes good channels will have bad advice. I've occasionally seen, someone who I thought was a very, very, very good source come out with a video, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. So, there is a lot of gray area, and it does take a long time to build up that bullshit meter. Like, mine is very finely tuned right now. Within the 30 seconds of a video, I can usually tell if someone knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Whether they're in it for themselves or not, like, that's something that you have to watch a few videos usually to get a vibe of like, what they actually are doing this for. But, if someone asked me about Renaissance paintings and I watched a few videos on that, I would have no idea if someone was just talking out of their ass or was actually a legit source, because I don't have a base in that field at all.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So with fitness, it does take a long time, and you can be led down the wrong path pretty easily.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of these cult channels, people don't have that wide base of following many different people. They only follow this one person. And so when someone else contradicts this one person, they get really up in arms because they've never actually heard about anything else. And so, it can be very, very tricky. And I would say get a wide variety of sources. Try to keep it evidence-based. And usually when someone is being honest in the fitness industry, they're not going to be speaking in absolutes ever. They'll never, ever be speaking in absolutes. Okay, maybe. But they will usually qualify what they're saying. Oh, this is personal experience, or this is based on this. If someone says something very definitive and they don't cite a source, you can probably ignore whatever they're saying. Like, this is this because of this. And then you're like, okay, do you have any references for this very specific claim? And they're just like, nah. That's, like, if you look at Joel Seedman, he will reference his own blog. So he'll make this ridiculous claim like, oh, this joint position is harmful, like it causes inflammation, and you'd be like, okay, well, any evidence for that? And he'll just be like, bitch, please, like, completely dismissive. And I think people are slowly waking up to that, but a lot of people are not. If you read his comments on his Instagram, again, they're in that bubble. They've swallowed the Kool-Aid, and nothing anyone says is going to dissuade them from believing what they believe, again, because they don't have that wide base. And I've actually had people tell me, Jeff, I unfollowed all other fitness people except for you. just to keep things simpler. And my reaction is not, yeah, I got another one. My reaction is like, no, what are you doing? Like, you want to still get a wide variety of sources, because there's a lot of stuff that, you know, I either don't know about or I'm not interested in, so I don't make videos about. So,
Yeah.
you know, getting that wide variety of information is super, super important. And then also applying it to yourself. You know, let's say you're doing an exercise, it feels great, you're seeing results, and someone says, hey, this exercise is like the worst exercise according to EMG data. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you should drop that exercise. Like, it's still an experiment of one, and you still have to be the exercise scientist doing that experiment on yourself, regardless of what other evidence or other anecdotes you hear. You still have to apply it yourself and see if it actually works. So when I hear people citing studies and they're just like, this is the exercise, well, they don't realize, you know, the results are going to be a bell curve. Some people respond really well, some people respond decently well, and some people don't respond at all. And so you don't even know where you are in that curve, and you have to find out by actually doing the experiment. You can't just look at, you know, what the average is in some study. You have to actually do the experiment yourself.
Absolutely. It's not going to work the same way. And, you know, real life isn't a laboratory. There's going to have to be some self experimentation. Obviously evidence and studies and stuff like that, they help guide you in the right direction, but they're not, like you said, nothing is an absolute. And one thing that is my pet peeve I used to have a lot of chronic back pain issues. So I would try to find these accounts that, you know, were showing mobility drills and all these like dorky, annoying corrective exercises. You know, one in particular that pisses me off is I don't know if you remember like Move You back in the day. I don't know if
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, yeah. I went down that rabbit hole and I'm like, dude, none of this stuff is helping me at all. And then I just found, so I just like stuck with the basics and got stronger. Like I just did pull-ups, face pulls, just worked my, like, you know, basic movements, squats, deadlifts, and just, you know, started gaining muscle. And it's like, oh, wow, my back feels so much better. I didn't need to do all those dorky corrective exercises and stuff like that. And what came with that when I was going down that rabbit hole was this fragility mindset. You know, if you do that, you're going to wreck your shoulders. If you do that, you're going to herniate a disc and blow your back out. And the fear mongering around exercises, honestly, it caused me, like, I feel like it was psychological, where it was like, oh, I think my back is hurt because I rounded my back. And you brought up the rounded back deadlift. Like, people were shitting on your form or whatever in certain videos.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, I already know that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with rounding your back. Your back is supposed to round. Can your back handle it or can't? Like, if you've been, I would argue that someone like you who lifts with more of a rounded back, you probably, if you tried to straighten your back out, would hurt yourself. You know?
Yeah, like I feel worse in extension. So I'm not only weaker, but it feels worse.
Yeah.
And, you know, everyone's spine is a little bit different. And yeah, sure, some people might have issues when they're very rounded. You know, the key is going to be having that strong and stable core, regardless of the position that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me personally, the only time I've ever felt anything in my back wasn't from deadlifting. And I've deadlifted millions of kilos like that. You would think, oh, there would be some issue by now. No issues, no pain, nothing, no symptoms or anything. The only thing was like overhead pressing, where it's the opposite. Instead of rounding, you're actually like potentially arching back. And that's the only time I've ever been like, yeah, I'm not gonna, that didn't feel quite right. So you sort of have to go by feel. And I think you can adapt to a variety of positions. The thing is, you can't market or sell or promote these basic movements. I mean, you can. There are, you know, starting strength, barbell medicine. Like, there are companies and ways to make money from the basic movements, but it's much more lucrative to be contrarian, to say, hey, no, these don't work. You have to do this special Bosu ball twisting thing because of look at that's the thing. If you have a skeleton in the video, the normies love it. They're just like, oh yeah,
This-
this guy knows this shit. If you're a doctor, holy shit, game over. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're a doctor of like, I don't know, herbology or something. You're a doctor and you can put doctor in your name in YouTube, fucking game over. Oh my god, people are just. I'm considering getting a doctorate in Chinese medicine. Just Dr. Geoffrey Verity Schofield. Oh my god, my followers would
fucking explode.
quadruple overnight. So the minute you have a doctorate, people are just like, oh, this guy must know what he's talking about, even if he looks like a sheet of iceberg lettuce when he just no thickness to him at all. It doesn't even look like he lifts, and he's a doctor though. So, and then a lot of that is just placebo. So you add this exercise in, and you believe it works, and therefore you feel better because for most normal people, belief is very, very important. If you're an elite athlete, or at least just how to push yourself, belief is no longer a limiting factor. Like if you actually know how to push yourself, it's not like you can believe you'll get more reps, and you will because you're already pushing hard. But if you're a normal person who doesn't know how to push hard anyway, having more self-belief can help you get more reps, or to help you just feel better in general, because you don't already have that self-belief. And so getting it from, a face pull or some kind of weird dumbbell external rotation or something, that can help. Plus, a lot of it is just blood flow and movement in general. And, sometimes just time. You have an issue and it would have resolved itself anyway.
Yeah.
But you added this in, and like, this is what did it. It wasn't the time. It wasn't like you reducing the weight on your bench press or something, which is what actually helped. It was this new magic restorative exercise. And the guys making these exercises, by and large, they know they're bullshit. It's just more content and more clicks, and like there's always a market for injured people.
That's the stuff that bugs me, because I was personally a sucker to that for a little bit. And now I'm like, you pieces of shit, you're just making this stuff up to, this exercise you've never seen before is going to be a game changer. It's like, well, no, it's not. There's a reason.
The thing is, like, a lot of these guys are creating the issues that they're also solving. So it's this endless loop of like, don't internally rotate, you'll hurt your shoulder. And then people they have this, again, fragile mindset, as you said. And so they think that they're because pain is it's more complex than people think. It's not just pain equals tissue damage. A lot of it has to do with your mental state and just your belief at how your body is working or not working. And so people think that they're injured when they're not actually injured. And I've experienced this with clients, where someone says, I get a message in my DMs from a client, and someone is like, oh, my knee hurts when warming up for squats. And I won't see the message because I'm sleeping if there's a time difference or something. And then 20 minutes later, I'll get another DM saying, never mind, I hit a new PR. Like, you weren't injured. It's just like, it's worth paying attention to. But some people are just so sensitive to those signals, because they've heard of it so many times that like everything is a potential injury. So
well, that's the thing for me. I was in a spot where I was thinking about it. Like I was hyper focused on, oh, I don't want to do that because like, oh, last time I did that, I that could tweak my back and put me out for a little bit or whatever. And it got to the point where I didn't train hard because of that. I'd be like, I can only train until my form needs to be meticulous. My form needs to be perfect. But now it's like, no, dude, I just go in there. I like shake my arms around a bit. I do like, I just start light on whatever movement. I hardly have any kind of warm up other than just working up to my working set on each movement. And I feel so much better than I've ever felt. Rarely have any kind of chronic pain issue. Every once in a while, like the right side of my back will act up, but it's like very, very seldom. And it doesn't cause me any real issues. And now I can actually train hard because I don't care if that last grinder rep doesn't look pretty. I'm not going to blow my shoulder out because I've been doing this enough that I know my body, right? And I'm not scared. And when people are scared that they're going to hurt themselves, or they feel like pain equals my spine is broken, that's actually causing more harm than good. in my
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. When people ask me about my warm up for squats, my answer is squats. Because like
yeah.
I just start with the bar and then I add weight. Same thing with bench press, same thing with deadlifts, except I start with 135 because of the plates on the ground. But yeah, I don't think I've ever done any kind of warm up like that in the past couple of years. Like it's walking to the gym as a general warm up, and
Yeah.
then like that's the general warm up, and then it's just doing the movement with lighter weights and just.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to do that because you want to feel how your body is moving, right? Like you should still listen to your body. Um, it's just not to be so sensitive. Yeah, hypersensitive is the best word for it, where you're like, oh, I didn't feel this moving correctly, therefore I should go back down and just use the bar. And
Mhm.
I mean, you look at Squat University,
Oh,
they've advocated some
oh,
bizarre stuff. Like his posts are either like startlingly obvious or like just fear mongering bullshit. It's like there's
yeah.
no
I don't.
middle ground.
He's got good content. I don't want to like attack
Yeah,
him personally or whatever. It's just that kind of content. You're creating a barrier of entry that is so high. Like the cost is so high that no one wants to work out. Like if you don't, if you, like, it's like, dude, most people just need to like a person can squat with subpar form, but as long as they can handle the load, it's not going to break them, right? In most
yeah,
cases. I'm not saying that's not an absolute, obviously, but it's not. I could lift with subpar form, or I could
yeah,
your body could get used to a multitude of different movements and exercises, but it's just, yeah, your body's used to moving a certain way. And
yeah,
to take it back to the low back thing, that's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot. Is the Heat and Squat University talks about this, like the demonization of spinal flexion of any kind.
yeah,
You posted that thing on I think it might be the last post on your Instagram, where you were
yeah,
doing like a rounded back. It was like a Jefferson deadlift. What's that
yeah.
called? Like, do you just make it up?
Yeah, kind of. So it's similar to a Jefferson curl. So Jefferson curl is, well, we all know what a deadlift is. A Jefferson curl is where you have usually a light weight in your hands, and then you're standing fully upright, and then you start rounding from the upper back, and you just round disc by disc by disc all the way until you are fully flexed over
Mhm.
and your hips are also fully flexed and you're getting a hamstring stretch. And so usually you do it standing on, plates or a block or something to get more range of motion. And you might use, kettlebell or maybe just the bar in order to get a little bit more resistance to help pull you down into that weighted stretch. And then you go back up and usually you do slow and controlled reps. And I was doing this where I was using 100 kilos.
Yeah, that was
And
reasonably heavy.
yeah, it was 225 ish.
Shit.
So yeah, so fairly heavy. I mean, I could go heavier, but that's one of those things where you don't want to go super heavy on it, right? Because again, the load management and the fatigue management and the volume are all going to be at least as important as the technique. Whereas a lot of these channels and accounts, they only focus on the technique, and they sort of ignore everything else, like the background and the physical preparedness, that kind of stuff. It's just how pretty does this look compared to the textbook. How textbook form are you using? And luckily the industry is sort of gradually moving away from that, I think. But a lot of these big accounts are still promoting you know, a 650-pound ugly squat is worse than a 500-pound normal squat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
there.
just showing this for people that want to see. Yeah, like it's pretty much like a hybrid of a Jefferson curl and a deadlift.
Yeah. So I'm just chilling down there.
Yeah, most people, Squat University would say this is going to kill your back. But have you ever had back problems?
Never.
That's interesting.
Yeah, never. And I would say this kind of thing, it's not something I would generally recommend starting with load, but the load management is the key aspect to it, because if you did this with no loading at all, just using, your arms and torso and head as resistance, and you ask people, is this dangerous? They would say no, right? It just, no, like, how is that dangerous? He's just stretching, he's just moving in space with no loading. What about the bar? Now it's 20 kilos, 45-ish pounds pulling down. Is that dangerous? A lot of people would say no. It's all relative. Like 20 kilos might get someone injured if they're completely unprepared and they've never lifted a weight in their life. And that's like a very, very heavy weight to them. An Olympic champion, they might do 150 kilos with this, if they're far stronger than me, or perhaps even more. I don't know. It depends on if they can actually feel the movement and if they're doing it correctly for them. So, it's the load management is super important in this case. And I think the body can adapt. It's just a question of being conservative and then giving it time. And that's one of the reasons why, especially if you're natural, I think injury risks are way, way lower than people think. The body will adapt at the same rate as the tiny amounts of muscle you're going to gain per year.
Why is that exactly? Because I've heard that if you're enhanced, that your muscles are adapting, but your joints and connective tissues aren't adapting. Is that true? Not as quick.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not catching up to the muscle growth. Is that true?
Yeah, especially for some lifts. I mean, I've heard crazy stories of people putting huge amounts of weight on their bench, like 100 pounds in a matter of weeks. Because a lot of these compounds, they also increase your neural drive and allow you to actually activate your nervous system more fully, which, I mean, it's good for performance. But again, that level of performance is something that is skyrocketing, getting more muscle, more neural drive, and the joints, ligaments, tendons, they adapt more slowly. Plus, some compounds, they actually actively hurt the joints. So they impair that side of the recovery. Some help, some hurt. I guess it depends on which specific compounds that you are running. I'm not an expert in this by any means. Most of my knowledge is just trickle down from more plates, more dates. I would say at least 70 or 80% of my knowledge in that area. Just because I don't really have enhanced clients. I have a couple, but not a lot. And so it's not really something I have to know about anyway. But certainly if you look at tears and tweaks and then other issues, if you're enhanced, that's something you have to be much more mindful about. And this is part of the reason why a lot of these enhanced guys, they train differently from naturals. Because they have to.
Earlier when you said compounds, when you said some of the compounds actively hurt your joints, I went into like compound lifts and I'm like, oh, what compound lifts hurt your joints? Are you fear mongering? Oh no.
Plot twist.
No, it's funny. To take it back to like the tendons, and that was one of the things when you made that video, you were trying to debunk that other guy's claims about, you loading the spine being this terrible thing. Like, it's like, well, dude, like I need to load my spine. I'm going to load, my head is loading my spine right now. Like I'm going to, there's so many things in life where you need to be able to load your spine just to be functionally strong. And I've seen literature showing that, spinal discs will adapt to load.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's true. Basically any joint, it can adapt over time. And again, it's slow. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a couple weeks and you're good to go. But it can happen and it does happen gradually. And I think it's something to keep in mind. And spinal loading is, I mean, it's something that is so needlessly vilified. And to the average person, they hear that and they're just like, oh, of course you don't want to load your spine. And it's just, it's one of those buzzwords, like same with lower back stress. Lower back stress. You don't want to stress your lower back.
Yeah, but what about when you're like doing bicep stress? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, pec stress. We don't want, lat
literally
stress.
That's what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, it's weird. And it's, it's one of those things that I guess the average person just thinks differently. And a lot of these bigger channels, they know what people are searching, like lower back pain. Most lower back pain is just from being sedentary and then from having a weak lower back. Like that's what most of it is coming from.
Yeah.
I think lower back pain is the number one cause of missed work in the United States. That's not from deadlifts. That's not from people.
No, because most people don't deadlift, right?
Yeah. And the people with lower back pain are usually the ones that come to me and say, I can't deadlift. Well, have you ever tried deadlifting? No, but I have a weak lower back. Well, maybe I have an exercise for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to me about the spinal flexion demonization, because why have we decided, like, this is something that intuitively, and I know intuition's not always correct, but intuitively, why have we decided that the spine or the lower back is the only thing that we can only ever work isometrically? We're not allowed to work it through a full dynamic range of motion. And I was actually first introduced to working it through a full, like extending, flexing, extending, through a mic. Dr. Mike Israetel had a video. It was just a back video, and it was flexion rows. I was like, whoa, what are these? I'm like, isn't that dangerous? And I was like, and then I tried them, and I just had like 2 10-pound dumbbells, just tiny amount of weight just to try the movement. I'm like, I've never felt that kind of low back pump in my life where you do a set, and then after you feel your back and like the muscles running along your spine, the erector spinae, are just pumped, like in a way I'd never felt, and not in a bad way. Like, oh, my back, like, oh wow, if I get these muscles strong, I feel like my back will be, invincible.
Yeah. If you look at my spinal erectors, you can actually like see them. Like if I'm bent over in a deadlift and looking from the front, you can see just those 2 strips of muscle going all the way up. And same with Mike Israetel. He has a penchant for posting very nude photos on his Instagram.
I've seen those.
Which is bodybuilding, I guess. But I mean, I've gotten a good look at the man's erectors. The back muscles, not the. But I mean, he's very well developed in that area, and you can see if someone deadlifts or not. You see some of these IFBB pros who are just using all machines. There's nothing down there. It's just a wasteland down there. Like they have big lats, they have decent traps.
Well, that's not really part of the bodybuilding look, right? Like the traditional bodybuilding look. I guess that midsection, the lower back and abs are they keep that area kind of small.
Yeah, like I don't think that the erectors are going to build like the waistline, because they're mostly just in the middle back. They might add a little bit because of the thickness. But I think the idea that deadlifts build your core might be from the obliques a little bit, because those are used to brace that area. But if you look at Ronnie Coleman's back, the spinal erectors run all the way up the back. So they do, I mean, they run all the way up to your neck. So they do add to that middle back thickness. It's just that they might not be as visibly apparent. And I saw one video of Ronnie Coleman flexing his back and the back double biceps. And before he did the shot, he flexed his erector spinae. And it was the weird, they moved outwards as he flexed it. Like when you flex your biceps, like it moves. He did that with his erector spinae, except without actually moving. He just flexed them, and it was, I don't think you can get that look without that, heavy deadlifting. Maybe heavy bent over rows can be a decent substitute. Perhaps squats. But if you're just doing like leg presses and Bulgarian split squats and machine rows, I mean, that area is just not going to be sufficiently challenged. And I think if you're doing like a 10-pound dumbbell with this kind of stuff, I'm not sure if that's a reasonable substitute either.
Yeah, maybe it's more of like it's just accessory work or whatever.
Yeah,
well, but even like that thing you're doing, that bent over, what's called the Jefferson deadlift, whatever you want to call it. That is like what do your erectors feel like when you're doing that? Like you feel that working like crazy, or?
If I do higher reps, yeah. But if I do, just a few reps, it's almost not even to develop that area. I mean, they'll get developed, but it's more it's almost more of a stretch, honestly, in the hips and in that area. And it certainly can build muscle. Um, but if I wanted to build erectors, I'd rather do heavier deadlifts, but with less range of motion, I guess, sort of counterintuitively, like an RDL, because you can use them actively, but they'll still grow if you use them isometrically. Like if you do
Yeah.
a very strict Romanian deadlift with a good amount of range of motion, so your torso is almost parallel with the floor in the
Yeah.
bottom position, even if there's no spinal movement, I mean, they're still working overtime because they are preventing you
Yeah.
from moving.
So that would be the meat and potatoes movements. Like a good loaded RDL is going to be what really grows the back.
Yeah, I think RDLs are very underrated for the
Mm.
back. I mean, obviously they're usually used for hamstring development, but
That's definitely a
you know,
back exercise as well. Some people
yeah, it's
may,
working everything.
yeah, some
It's
people may
just
argue that, but
yeah, it's
I,
going to be working everything back there.
I actually like pretty much don't conventionally deadlift right now. I pretty much just do like trap bar Romanian deads and stuff like that. I'm curious. There's kind of a push. There's certain camps, Paul Carter and the guys from N1. They kind of they're not like super contrarian, but they kind of step away from the big compounds. And I'm wondering, you talk a lot about, as a natural lifter. That's actually something I wanted to talk about as well. Is like natural versus enhanced. Is it good to really think about it that way? Because I've always thought that was kind of like, oh, it can be a little, natural guys obsessing over who's natural or not. And that's like the toxicity of the natty or not thing. And people being like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that guy's on drugs. I'll never have that. It's like, well, people are just making excuses for themselves. Cause obviously there's a ton of, well, maybe not a ton, but there's natural lifters who look amazing. And you could take it back to, the silver era, the guys, who weren't using drugs, they look amazing. Not compared to, like, I think that those physiques look amazing personally, but comparing them to bodybuilders today, they don't hold up. But anyways, like the whole natural versus enhanced thing, like, is it valuable to think of it in those terms?
Well, I guess there's sort of a spectrum of enhanced. Like, if you're on TRT, should your training really change appreciably? Probably not. Like I have a few clients on TRT. I don't really. I mean, it doesn't really change stuff in practice very much. I think it matters most at the edge when you're getting very, very strong. Because part of the reason why, again, they train differently in many cases is just because of that risk of injury. Like that Ryan Crowley guy who tore his pec trying to incline 5 plates. That's not going to happen if you're natural, most likely. It's just you're not going to be moving 5 plates anyway, most likely.
Whoa.
Yeah, like using 2 or 3 plates is going to be, much more reasonable because the absolute load does matter in terms of just rates of injury. And I had a lot of people message me after that saying, oh, is incline bench pressing dangerous? But you have to realize like all the factors that went into that. He hadn't done the incline in months and months and months. He had an existing shoulder injury. He had already done a max set. It was way more weight than he had ever lifted. He was, benching with people who were stronger than him and egging him on. I mean, there were other factors as well. I did a whole video on it. But if you have, most people are not going to have all those factors or probably any of those factors if they're just doing a normal workout. Like you're going to be progressively overloading. You're not going to be using that massive of a weight. Your technique is going to be good. He was using like partial range of motion where, he was stopping right at the area where you have the most stress. So instead of going down and then reversing, he was just stopping at the moment where there's the most stress and trying to reverse it there, which,
Yeah.
well, that's where it snapped. Like right where he was about to reverse it, it reversed him. Uno reverse card, boom. And when you step back from that situation, you can see why it happened. right? You can just say, okay, well, this, there's, a dozen factors as to why he got injured. And this is part of the reason why enhanced lifters train differently, because they see this happen on a much more regular basis. And they're like, oh no, you can keep that shit away from me. And so they go for more of the pump, the volume training, not going close to failure, the hard contractions, more machines, partial range of motion, etc. And this is very effective for them. But if you're a natural and you try to emulate this training style, I'm not going to say you get no results, because if you're a beginner, like, shit, everything is going to work.
Yeah.
But it is limited in the progression. And if you're trying to train like an enhanced lifter all the time, I mean, it's just, it has an expiration date for how far you can progress on that kind of thing. And almost all natural lifters that I encounter train quite similarly. There's differences, obviously, in exercise selection and then in the amount of volume and the split, etc. But strength is almost always a main goal. Usually the volume is not super excessive. And then progression always has a clear path, and it's always a goal. It's never just like, oh, we're gonna feel the muscle working. It's more about where you're going with the movement than just doing it in the moment.
Yeah, I feel like as a natural, you need to work so much harder that it makes you, well, in most cases, I don't.
Yes and no. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're on gear, you can either train way harder or not nearly as hard, and you'll get better results anyway.
Yeah.
So when people are like, oh, I just work hard, like these fake natties who are like, no, I just work hard. Well, yeah, if you're taking drugs, like, that's one of the reasons why you can do huge amounts of volume, because you're not as sensitive to cortisol, you recover way faster, etc. And so, yeah, it's just not going to be as effective if you're natural.
And you also had a video, you were on a podcast, the Brains and Gains podcast, and you said something. I'm not going to put words in your mouth because I can't remember exactly what you said, but I feel like I think you said you need to consider whether or not you should be following as a natural some of these enhanced lifters, like whether or not their advice applies to you. And that actually made me think. At first I was like, well, there's tons of, Mike Israetel, like, right? He has tons of great advice that naturals can use, but maybe like you said, you used him as an example that he sees things through a certain lens. As someone, it is not going to be the same. Like someone who has maxed out their genetic potential as a natural and someone who is enhanced, they're going to have different perspectives on training. I think it's just inevitable. And that's not to discredit both of those athletes worked hard. Like both of those people worked hard, but it's just, they're going to have different perspectives, and maybe like the natural guy who hit his genetic limit is going to have a better guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, again, it does change the way you train quite a bit. Again, a lot of it is avoiding the injury, but then you can just get away with doing stuff that wouldn't work, right? Like if you're an advanced natural and you're doing stupid training, you just won't go anywhere. Like it just won't work. Whereas if you're enhanced, you could literally do anything in some cases. Like you can go in and just do the stupidest training plan, and especially if you have the genetic response to steroids, literally anything. I mean, you can do German volume training, super high volume, or you could do one set to failure. I mean, anywhere in the middle. And as long as like you're getting blood into those muscles, you're already getting elevated protein synthesis levels all the time, all week. And so, bro split completely fine, or train everything every day. Also fine, because you're going to be recovering anyway. So it's like it's just everything is raised to 11, and suddenly your decisions don't matter, apart from the dosage, because that does matter, especially over time as you need to increase those dosages to keep gaining. But in terms of like the programming, it's very much secondary to the steroids and then also to the genetics. And so, if you're natural, you don't have those luxuries. Like your programming decisions actually matter to a very significant degree. And so, if I went enhanced and I spent 10 years enhanced, after those 10 years, I'm not sure if my advice would be very good, because that's a long time to forget what it was like training naturally. And you see a lot of these guys, that's pretty much what has happened in large part, where a lot of their advice isn't quite going to be applicable to the average natural trainee in large part.
No, that makes sense, man. Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that for a little bit there. And even some of these guys that have gotten big doing, not necessarily just natural versus enhanced training, but also people that they advocate for a certain kind of training now that they didn't actually use to get them big. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's something I've actually kind of noticed. Well, I'm like, well, did you were huge doing these like basic barbell movements. So should I really follow the advice you're saying now, just stay away from some of these movements and do this other thing? And yeah, it's just stuff to think about, because what got them big, right?
Yeah. So I think it's okay to change your mind. There's a lot of stuff that I've changed my mind, on over the years, and it's okay to update your opinions. And certainly there's some content that I put out where I reread and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I would word it the same way.
Yeah.
Like some stuff on EMG, I have a few core answers where it's like, here are the top 6 shoulder exercises, and like the only evidence is just EMG, 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 which isn't really a great way to decide things.
Yeah.
But for the most part, all my content, even from 2 years ago, a lot of the stuff has already been solidified more or less in my mind. I mean, I'm still learning and updating my opinion. But it's not like my answers from 2 years ago are awful. Whereas, yeah, some guys, they're essentially talking shit about what gave them the best gains they've ever had. And to me, that just seems very strange and backwards. Ryan Humiston is the best example, where, he built his physique. I mean, obviously he's enhanced, but he built his physique with the basic movements, heavy, progressively overloaded. And then now he comes out with videos saying, hey, no, you want to feel the muscle, you want to do partial range of motion, you want to go light, you want to, get that burn, squeeze, pump, contraction, whatever. When that's not what got him big. It's sort of what got him leaner and small compared to what he was before. But it's not what actually built his physique.
That's interesting. Yeah, we're at the 1 hour mark now, and I have one other. It's kind of a selfish question because it's something that I've been thinking about recently. Overtraining. To me, there are days where I feel like I want to be at the gym every day. That's just the kind of person I am. I love training, and there are times where it's like, no, I need to take today as an off day, even though I don't necessarily feel like I need to take today as an off day. And right now I'm just doing like a legs push pull day off. Usually I do legs push pull day off, legs push pull day off kind of thing. But right now I'm doing legs push pull day off. And then I do like a day that's like just focused on my weaknesses, then a day off, and then I start the cycle again. And I'm kind of thinking, like, as far as frequency goes for someone as a natural lifter, if you want to frame it that way, if I'm hitting a muscle really hard, and if for me, it's like I'm more focused on intensity than volume. In your opinion, if you're hitting a muscle, every 6 days, but you're giving it intense, like you're really like taking those sets close to failure. Like, what's your opinion on that as far as a structure for training? Because I've seen you advocate, some people that do like the legs push pull or push pull legs or whatever variation of that, they do like 6 days a week, push pull legs, day off. And I think you had that in a video. And I was like, well, 6 days in the gym, is that too much, or does it all just come down to the individual?
So there certainly is an individual factor. Like if I had a beginner, I probably wouldn't advocate them being in the gym 6 days a week, because most don't want to, but then also it's not as needed. If you're more advanced, I would err on the side of higher frequency, but I would look at the progression over anything. Like if you can progress even on a bro split, if you're getting stronger, and the weights are going up gradually, and you're consistent with it and happy with it, I'm happy to sign off on a bro split, even if I usually prefer slightly higher frequencies. For most muscle groups, I prefer twice a week personally, if not 3 times per week. I've done the high frequency full body thing a few different times, and it can work, but it is tough to recover from. And I think you have to sort of hold back when you're doing it. When you're training your whole body 4, 5, 6 times a week, you sort of have to manage your volume, manage how close you're going to failure, and then manage your overall fatigue. Sometimes it can take longer to warm up just because you go in and you're still sore, that kind of thing. And it can work well. I think that's, if someone was like, you need to gain as much muscle as you can in the next month, like I would do high frequency, full body training and eat a shitload of food, just because you're getting in more stimulation on a frequent basis. That being said, I'm not sure how sustainable it is, so I wouldn't run that year round. I would say every 5 to 6 days is fine, as long as you're progressing. And some body parts seem to recover faster. So if you hit the hamstrings really hard, it might take 5 or 6 days to get unsore and then actually repair the damage and make sure everything is firing well again. Whereas something like the rear delts, it might take a couple of days.
For me personally, I feel like I could work my arms every day.
Yeah.
Like biceps, I could just work biceps every day.
Yeah, usually every muscle group is going to have a limiting factor. Sometimes it's the muscle group itself, but sometimes it's a joint or a tendon. So usually for biceps, it's going to be elbows. Sometimes wrists, rarely shoulders, but elbows. Usually it's the elbows for most people. And then for triceps, usually it's again the elbows. And then, for chest, often it's the shoulders that go before the rotator cuff. But you'll find that usually it's not the muscle itself. It's the structures around it supporting it. And so you just have to know yourself and know which areas are more sensitive than others. Like for me, my knees are quite durable. Elbows also pretty durable. Low back, very durable.
Because you're doing that rounded back deadlift, man.
Yeah, exactly. But my hips, if I do some movements, that'll take me out of commission pretty quick. And so you just have to know which areas are more sensitive and which exercises beat you up a little bit more. I'm not a huge fan of stimulus to fatigue ratio in general, because often it causes people to shy away from fatigue excessively to where they can't deadlift 2 plates, but they can't deadlift because of, that's a horrible stimulus to fatigue ratio exercise. And it is, but maybe you need more stimulus and more fatigue, and that's fine because it's still only 225 and, man up, I guess. But I think thinking about stimulus to fatigue ratio in terms of joints and tendons and areas that you are personally prone to injury is very useful, because that is often going to be the limiting factor, especially in the long term when it comes to achieving your muscular potential. So I would say, in summary, pretty much any split can work. You just have to manage the variables within that split and then make sure you're progressing well over time.
Cool, man. That's a great place to wrap it up. We've been talking over an hour now. I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours because I got other questions on here, but we'll do this again sometime, man. If you just want to tell people where they can find you online, that'd be great.
Yeah, so Geoffrey Verity Schofield on Instagram, Geoffrey Verity Schofield. Just type in Geoffrey V and it'll probably auto.
That's actually a hard name. I remember it by how hard it is.
So I've gotten people who are like very
name,
adamant that I should change my name. Like, yeah, you should delete some stuff here because you made me type in an extra few characters. Damn it. So that's Instagram, and then also the YouTube channel, and then Quora. I'll consider it a test of the viewers' intelligence if they can find my accounts or not. So
Yeah.
that's your homework, dear viewer. If you can find my accounts, then you are worthy.
I'll also I'll link your ebook in the description of this when I.
Oh, cool.
Sounds good, buddy. Well, you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.